The fluorescent lights hummed above Walter Mitchell's head as Dr. Sarah Bennett's hands trembled over the metal forceps. Something glinted under the surgical lamp. Not pus, not tissue, metal. "Mr. Mitchell!" Her voice cracked. "This shouldn't be inside you." Walter's 73-year-old heart hammered against his ribs. The object on the sterile tray looked like a tiny capsule, no bigger than a grain of rice, with numbers etched into its surface. SEN 1970-447. The room tilted. Suddenly, he was 25 again, standing in line at Fort Lewis, rolling up his sleeve, the needle, the burning sensation, the doctor's cold smile. "They're putting something in us." Ryan's voice echoed from 15 years ago, his son's last phone call from Afghanistan before he vanished. Walter had called him paranoid, told him it was the war playing tricks on his mind. He'd been wrong. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. 3 weeks earlier, Walter Mitchell sat at his kitchen table in Northeast Portland, staring at the stack of unopened envelopes. Red stamp screamed, "Final notice," across white paper. The mortgage company wanted $4,800. He had $163 in his checking account. The house smelled like burnt coffee and old gold cigarettes. Paint peeled from the window frames in long, sad strips. Margaret used to keep this place spotless, but Margaret had been gone for 3 years now. Gone in what the police called a single-car accident on Highway 20. No witnesses, no explanation for why her brakes failed on a straight stretch of road. Walter crushed his cigarette in an overflowing ashtray and looked at the photograph on the mantel. Ryan, 22 years old in his army dress uniform, grinning like he owned the world. That picture was taken 2 weeks before his first deployment to Afghanistan. 2 years before the phone calls started getting strange. 3 years before he disappeared. "Morning, soldier," Walter said to the photograph, same as he did every morning. The house stayed silent. His left arm itched. The bump had appeared about 2 weeks ago, just above his elbow. At first, he thought it was a bug bite, then maybe a cyst. Old age brought all sorts of indignities. But this thing felt different. When he pressed on it, something hard shifted beneath the skin. Last night, he'd tried to squeeze it himself. Bad idea. The pain shot up to his shoulder like electricity. When he pulled his hand away, his fingers were slick with blood. But underneath, he could swear he felt something solid, something that didn't belong. The knock on his door startled him. Patricia O'Connor from next door stood on his porch, holding a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil. "Walt, you look terrible," she said, pushing past him into the kitchen. Patricia was 72 and had no concept of personal boundaries. "When's the last time you ate something that wasn't from a can?" "I'm fine." "Pat, you're not fine. Let me see that arm." He'd made the mistake of mentioning the bump to her yesterday while taking out the trash. Patricia had been a nurse for 40 years before retiring. She grabbed his elbow before he could protest. Her fingers probed the swollen area. Walter winced. "That needs to be looked at today." "I don't have money for doctors." "You have Medicare. Don't you? Kaiser Permanente is 20 minutes away. I'm driving you." "Pat." No arguments. Walter Mitchell Margaret would haunt me if I let you sit here and rot. The mention of his wife's name ended the discussion. An hour later, he sat in an examination room at Kaiser Permanente, paper crinkling under him on the table. The nurse who'd taken his vitals said the doctor would be in shortly. The room smelled like antiseptic and fear. When the door opened, Walter looked up expecting some young resident who'd rush him out in 5 minutes. Instead, a woman in her mid-30s entered, dark hair pulled back, wearing a white coat over a blue blouse. What caught his attention was the small pin on her lapel, an American flag crossed with a yellow ribbon, a veteran's pin. "Mr. Mitchell, Sarah Bennett." She shook his hand with a firm grip. Her eyes were kind, but carried a sadness he recognized. "Let's take a look at what's bothering you." She examined the bump carefully, her brow furrowing. "How long has this been here?" "Couple weeks." "Any history of cysts or lipomas?" "Not that I know of." She pressed gently around the area. "There's definitely something firm underneath. I'd like to do a small incision and see what we're dealing with. It'll take about 20 minutes." Walter nodded as she prepared her instruments. He found himself asking, "That pin your father served?" Sarah's hands paused for just a moment. "Yes, Vietnam, same as you. I'm guessing 70 through 72. My dad was there in 69 and 70. Captain David Bennett." The name rang distant bells, but Walter couldn't place it. Thousands of men had cycled through those years. "He make it home okay." Sarah's expression closed like a door. "He made it home, but he never really left the war behind." She picked up a scalpel. "This might sting a bit." As the blade touched his skin, Walter wondered if Captain David Bennett had also sat in rooms like this, holding secrets that ate him alive from the inside out. He wondered if the man's daughter knew how many of them came home carrying invisible wounds that never healed. He had no idea that in 15 minutes they'd discover a wound that was all too visible and had been hiding inside him for over 50 years. The metal object sat in a stainless steel dish between them, impossibly small and impossibly wrong. Sarah Bennett's face had gone pale, her gloved hands still holding the forceps, as if frozen mid-motion. "Mr. Mitchell, I need you to stay calm," she said, but her voice betrayed her own shock. "I'm going to step out for a moment and consult with a colleague." "What is that thing?" "I don't know yet. Please, just wait here." She left, taking the metal capsule with her. Walter sat on the examination table, a bandage now covering the incision on his arm. His mind raced backward through decades. Fort Lewis, Washington, winter of 1970. He'd been 23 years old, fresh out of basic training, waiting to ship out to Vietnam. They'd lined up outside the medical building, 200 young men in identical green fatigues. The doctor said it was a special immunization, something new to protect them from diseases in Southeast Asia. Walter remembered the needle going in, the burning sensation that lasted for hours. He remembered 6 guys from his unit got sick that night, vomiting, fever, hallucinations. The medics said it was just a reaction to the vaccine. But Tom Hayes had grabbed his arm in the barracks, eyes wild with fever. "They put something in us. Walt, I can feel it. Something's wrong." By morning, Tom was fine. They all were. And 2 weeks later, they were on a plane to hell. Walter's hands trembled. He pulled out his phone, a basic flip model that Ryan had bought him years ago because, "Dad, you need to be reachable." He scrolled through his contacts until he found the email address Ryan had sent from Afghanistan. The last message, dated March 2009. Dad, something's happening here. They did something during our pre-deployment training. I know you think I'm losing it, but I'm not. There's metal inside my arm. I can feel it moving sometimes. Other guys in my unit, they're acting strange, violent. We're not ourselves. If anything happens to me, you need to know this wasn't an accident. Walter had written back. Son, you need to talk to the psychiatrist on base. This sounds like stress, PSD. Please get help. 3 weeks later, Ryan was declared missing in action. No body recovered. The Army said he'd gone out on patrol and never came back. They listed him as killed in action after a year, but without remains. There was no funeral, no seizure. Margaret had died 6 months after the KIA notification arrived. The police said she'd fallen asleep at the wheel. But Margaret never fell asleep driving. She was meticulous, careful, and her car had been serviced 2 days before the accident. The door opened. Sarah returned, but she wasn't alone. She'd brought another doctor, an older man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Mr. Mitchell, this is Dr. Robert Hendricks, our chief of radiology. Sarah said, I've shown him what we found. We'd like to do some imaging x-rays of your entire body, no charge. Walter's mouth went dry. You think there's more of them? Sarah and Dr. Hendricks exchanged glances. We think it's possible, Sarah said quietly. Mr. Mitchell, have you ever had any unexplained health issues? Headaches? Mood changes? Memory problems? I'm 73, I've got all of those. What about before in your 40s or 50s? Walter thought back. The rage episodes that started in his 30s, the nightmares that never stopped, the depression that came in waves so black he couldn't see daylight. He'd always blamed the war. Every vet he knew carried similar burdens. Yeah, he admitted. But everyone who went over there came back different. Not like this, Sarah said. She sat down on the stool across from him. Mr. Mitchell, Walt. My father killed himself when I was 5 years old, before he died. He left a note. Just one line, they put something in us. I can feel it watching. The room tilted. David Bennett. Your father was David Bennett. You knew him. I knew of him. Different unit. But we crossed paths at Fort Lewis. He was there the same week I got that shot. Walter's voice dropped to a whisper. The same medical building. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. I became a doctor to understand what happened to him. I've examined 12 veterans over the years who mentioned similar symptoms. Paranoia about something inside them, violent mood swings, suicidal ideation. But I never found anything physical until now. Dr. Hendricks cleared his throat. We should do those x-rays immediately. 20 minutes later, Walter lay on a cold table while machines hummed and clicked around him. He stared at the ceiling tiles and counted them to keep from screaming. When they finally lit him up, Sarah's face told him everything before she said a word. 3, she said. There are 3 of them, 1 in each arm, and one, her voice caught, 1 near the base of your skull. The room spun. Walter gripped the edge of the table. How is that possible? How did they get there? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Sarah pulled out her phone and took photos of the X-ray images. I have a colleague who specializes in foreign objects in the body. I'm sending these to her tonight on my own dime. Whatever this is, Whatever they did to you, to my father, someone is going to answer for it." "My son," Walter said. "Ryan told me. He said they did something to him, too." "Where is Ryan now?" Walter's voice broke. "Missing in action. Afghanistan, 2009. They never found his body." Sarah reached across and took his hand. Her grip was strong, steady. "Then we find out what happened. Together. For your son. For my father. For everyone they did this to." Outside the window, a black SUV sat in the parking lot, engine running, windows tinted too dark to see inside. 3 days later, Sarah Bennett stood on Walter Mitchell's front porch, holding a manila envelope that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Through the screen door, she could see him sitting at the kitchen table, cigarette smoke curling toward the yellowed ceiling. He looked like he hadn't slept since the examination. She knocked. Walter's head jerked up, and for a moment she saw the young soldier. He must have been alert, ready for danger. Old instincts never died. "Come in, Doc. Door's open." The house smelled like stale tobacco and loneliness. Sarah had been in enough veterans' homes to recognize the signs: unopened mail stacked high, dishes in the sink, photographs frozen in time on every surface, a shrine to a life that stopped moving forward years ago. "I got the results back," she said, sitting across from him without waiting for an invitation. "You should probably sit down." "I am sitting down." "Then hold on to something." She opened the envelope and spread the documents across the table, pushing aside an ashtray and a coffee mug that said, "World's Best Dad." The irony made her chest tight. The metal objects aren't medical implants. They're tracking devices, military grade, manufactured sometime in the late 1960s. My colleague has never seen anything like them outside of classified government research. Walter's cigarette burned forgotten between his fingers. Tracking devices. The technology is primitive by today's standards, but sophisticated for the era. What's more disturbing is their placement, the one near your skull. She pulled out an anatomical diagram. It's positioned next to a cluster of nerves that control emotional regulation, fear response, aggression. You're saying they were trying to control us. I'm saying they were trying to monitor you, maybe influence certain responses. Sarah leaned forward. "Walt, I did some research into military experiments from that period. Project MK Ultra, Project Artichoke. The government has a documented history of testing on soldiers without their knowledge or consent." Walter's hand started shaking. Ash fell onto the papers. "Ryan knew. He tried to tell me. Tell me about Ryan. Everything." So Walter talked. He told her about his son who'd joined the army against his wishes, who'd been so proud in his uniform, so eager to serve, about the phone calls that started coming 6 months into his deployment calls, where Ryan sounded paranoid, scared, talking about strange medical procedures during training that he couldn't quite remember clearly. "I told him it was stress," Walter said, his voice cracking. "I told him to see a psychiatrist. I thought he was having a breakdown. What kind of father?" He couldn't finish. Sarah reached across and gripped his wrist. "You didn't know. No one knew. Margaret knew, or she suspected." Walter stood abruptly and walked to a closet. He pulled out a cardboard box from the top shelf. Dust, raining down. She kept everything about Ryan. Every letter, every email after he went missing. She became obsessed with finding answers. She spent hours online printing articles, making phone calls to the VA, to congressmen, to anyone who would listen. He dumped the box's contents on the table, newspaper clippings about military experiments, printed emails to government officials, most stamped with form letter responses, medical records, and at the bottom, a small USB drive taped to a folded piece of paper. Sarah picked up the paper. Margaret's handwriting. Shaky and urgent. Walt, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I was getting too close to the truth about Ryan. They called me twice, telling me to stop asking questions. The USB has everything Ryan sent before he disappeared. I should have shown you sooner, but you weren't ready to believe. I'm sorry. I love you. Keep looking for our son. He's alive. I know he is. The date on the note was 2 days before Margaret's fatal car accident. Walter's knees buckled. Sarah caught him, guided him back to the chair. He was crying now, great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. They killed her. Jesus Christ, they killed Margaret. We don't know that for certain. Don't we? Walter's eyes, red and fierce, met hers. My wife spends months digging into military experiments. She gets warning calls. Then her brakes fail on a straight road. You're a doctor. You believe in evidence. Look at the evidence. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up the USB drive. We need to see what's on this. Walter's computer was ancient, but it worked. Sarah plugged in the drive. One folder, multiple files, documents, photos, and a video file dated March 15th, 2009. She clicked the video. The screen filled with Ryan Mitchell's face, younger than in the photograph on the mantel, but aged beyond his years. He was in a dark room, speaking in whispers, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. Dad, if you're watching this, I was right. I know you think I'm crazy, but I'm not. During pre-deployment at Fort Benning, they gave us enhanced medical screenings. I woke up one night in the medical facility with no memory of how I got there. My arm was sore. There was a bandage. When I asked the medic about it, he said I'd volunteered for a research study and signed a waiver. But, Dad, I never signed anything. Ryan leaned closer to the camera. 3 other guys in my unit have the same experience. We compared notes. All of us have small scars in the same places, upper arms, behind the ear. And all of us have been having the same symptoms. Rage episodes, nightmares, worse than anything we saw in combat, feeling like something's watching us from inside our own heads. The video quality shook as Ryan adjusted the camera. I've been documenting everything, taking pictures of classified documents I found in the medical officer's files. Project Sentinel, that's what they're calling it, Dad. They're still doing this. Whatever they did to you in Vietnam, they're doing to us now. Different technology. Same goal. Ryan's voice dropped even lower. I'm going to expose this. I'm sending copies to journalists, to congressmen, to anyone who'll listen. If I disappear, you'll know why. Tell Mom I love her. And, Dad, I need you to believe me. Please, just this once, believe me. The video cut to black. Walter's phone rang, shattering the silence. Unknown number. His hand hovered over it. Don't answer, Sarah started, but Walter picked up. Hello, a man's voice, gravelly with age. Stop digging, Mitchell, or you'll end up like your wife, like your son. Some stones are better left unturned. The line went dead. The rain hammered against the windshield as Sarah drove north on Interstate 5 toward Seattle. Walter sat in the passenger seat, staring at the folder in his lap, copies of everything from Ryan's USB drive, plus the medical report Sarah had compiled. 3 hours to Seattle, 3 hours to find Tom Hayes and pray he'd talk. "You didn't have to do this," Walter said for the third time since they'd left Portland at dawn. "Yes, I did." Sarah merged into the left lane, passing a semi-truck that sprayed water across the windows. "They threatened you. They killed your wife. If we don't find answers now, they'll make sure we never do." Walter had barely slept after the phone call. He'd sat up all night with Margaret's box, reading through her research. His wife had been meticulous. She'd found patterns: soldiers from Fort Lewis in 1970, Fort Benning in 2008, Fort Hood in 2010. All reported similar symptoms before dying in suspicious circumstances. Car accidents, suicide, overdoses, drownings. 23 names on Margaret's list. 19 were dead. Tom Hayes was one of the 4 still breathing. The drive gave Walter too much time to remember. Fort Lewis, January 19th. The medical building had been new then, all white walls and bright lights. They'd processed 200 men that week. Assembly line efficiency. Roll up your sleeve. Don't ask questions. This is for your country. He remembered standing in line next to a kid from Ohio who wouldn't stop talking. "You think this'll hurt? My brother said the shots in basic were nothing, but this one sounds different. Special immunization, they said." "What are they immunizing us against that we didn't already get?" The kid's name was Bobby something. Walter never saw him again after Vietnam. Added him to the mental list of faces that haunted his sleep. "Tell me about Tom Hayes," Sarah said, pulling him from the memory. "We went through basic together. Kept in touch after the war for a few years. Then life got in the way. I tried calling him after Ryan disappeared, but he never called back. Figured he didn't want to talk about the old days, or couldn't. They found Tom's house in the Lake City neighborhood, a modest rambler with a well-kept lawn and the American flag hanging by the front door. A woman in her 40s answered their knock. She had Tom's eyes. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Tom Hayes. We served together. I'm Walter Mitchell." Recognition flickered across her face. "Jennifer Hayes, I am Tom's daughter. He's mentioned you." She glanced over her shoulder, lowering her voice. "He's not well. Early-stage dementia. Some days are better than others." "Please," Walter said. "It's important. It's about what happened at Fort Lewis in 1970. Jennifer's expression hardened. "Wait here." She returned 5 minutes later. "He'll see you, but he's agitated today. If he gets upset, you need to leave." Tom Hayes sat in a recliner by the window, 75 years carved into every line of his face. But his eyes were sharp when they landed on Walter. "Walt Mitchell, son of a bitch. Thought you were dead." "Not yet. Tom." They sat. Sarah introduced herself as a doctor researching veteran health issues. Tom studied her with suspicious intelligence that belied his daughter's dementia diagnosis. "You're not here about my health," Deb said. Walter pulled out the photograph from Fort Lewis, 200 young men in formation, Tom and Walter circled in red ink by Margaret's hand. "Do you remember this day?" Tom's hands started shaking. "I don't want to talk about that." "Tom, please, my son Ryan is missing. Before he disappeared, he told me they did the same thing to him that they did to us. I need to know what happened." Nothing happened. We got shots. We went to war. We came home. End of story. Then why are 19 men from that photograph dead? Walter spread out Margaret's list. 19 suspicious deaths in 50 years. That's not coincidence. Tom stood abruptly, knocking over a glass of water. You need to leave, now. Dad, Jennifer rushed in. They told me not to talk. Tom's voice cracked with something between anger and terror. They said they'd hurt you if I talked too. They said they'd hurt Jennifer and the grandkids. So I kept my mouth shut for 50 years. And you come here and... He stopped, realizing what he'd admitted. Walter rose slowly. Who told you? Tom, who threatened you? Tom collapsed back into his chair, tears streaming down his weathered face. I don't remember names. A colonel came to my house in 1975 right after Bobby Crenshaw died. Told me Bobby had been asking too many questions about Fort Lewis. Told me the same thing could happen to me if I wasn't careful. So I stopped asking, stopped remembering. Bobby Crenshaw, Sarah said softly. The soldier from Ohio. Walter nodded, throat tight. He was on the list. Died in a house fire in 1970. Jennifer stood frozen in the doorway, her face pale. Dad, what are you talking about? Oh, what did they do to you? Tom looked at his daughter with infinite sadness. They put things inside of us. Sweetheart, little metal things. Some of the guys said they could feel them moving. I never felt mine. But I knew it was there, always watching, always listening. He turned to Walter. That's why I didn't call you back after Ryan went missing. I knew what happened to him. Same thing that happened to Bobby, to David Bennett, to all the others who asked too many questions. Sarah leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, do you have any documentation? Anything from that time? Burned it all, sure, years ago. Too dangerous to keep. But Bobby Crenshaw, before he died, he sent copies of something to his brother. Military papers. Said it was insurance. I don't know if the brother still has them. Where's the brother? Spokane, last I heard. Robert Crawford. Went by Bob. Walter's heart jumped. Bob Crawford was on Margaret's list, one of the 4 still alive. They left shortly after, with Bob Crawford's last known address, and Tom's warning ringing in their ears. They're watching, Walt. They've always been watching. You go digging into this, they'll bury you. As they drove away, Jennifer Hayes ran out to the car. Sarah rolled down the window. My father has nightmares, Jennifer said, her voice shaking. Every night, the same dream. He's in a white room, and doctors are putting something in his arm while he screams for them to stop. I always thought it was just war trauma, but it's real, isn't it? They really did something to him? Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Find out what, please? My dad deserves to know the truth before he forgets everything. On the highway heading east toward Spokane, Walter noticed the black SUV 3 cars back. Same one that had been parked outside Kaiser Permanente. Same one he'd seen on his street yesterday morning. Sarah, he said quietly, don't react, but we're being followed. Bob Crawford's house sat at the end of a gravel road in Spokane's Hilliard neighborhood, a part of the city that time and prosperity had forgotten. The paint was peeling, the gutters sagging, but an American flag flew crisp and clean from a pole in the yard. Walter noticed the security cameras mounted at each corner of the property, unusual for such a rundown place. They'd lost the black SUV an hour outside Seattle, or thought they had. Sarah had taken random exits, doubled back, Used every evasive maneuver she could think of, but the knot in Walter's stomach told him they weren't safe. They'd never be safe again. Bob Crawford answered the door with a shotgun in his hands. "Bob, it's Walter Mitchell. We served together at Fort Lewis." The old man's eyes been narrowed behind thick glasses, then widened with recognition. "Walt, Jesus, I thought you were dead. They told me you were dead." "Who told you that?" Bob lowered the shotgun, but didn't invite them in. "Same people who've been watching my house for 20 years. Same people who killed my wife in '98 and made it look like cancer. You shouldn't have come here. You've led them right to me." "Bob, please," Sarah said. "I'm Dr. Sarah Bennett. My father was David Bennett. He served with you both. I need to know what happened at Fort Lewis." At David's name, Bob's expression crumpled. "David, God, I tried to help him, tried to tell him to keep quiet, but he wouldn't listen, kept saying we had to expose it, had to tell people." He stepped back, opening the door wider. "Get inside. Quickly." The interior of the house was a fortress. Windows covered with blackout curtains. More security monitors showing every angle of the property. And covering every wall, documents, photographs, newspaper clippings, strings connecting them like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Except it wasn't a theory. "I've spent 50 years collecting evidence," Bob said, gesturing to the walls. "Nobody believed me. My kids think I'm crazy. Veterans Affairs cut off my benefits in '85 after I kept filing complaints. But I kept digging because someone has to remember what they did to us." Walter moved closer to the wall. There were the photographs from Fort Lewis, the same one he had, plus others he'd never seen. Medical forms with Project Sentinel stamped across the top, handwritten notes from doctors, death certificates, 23 names exactly matching Margaret's list. "You knew all of them," Walter whispered. "Every single one. We were the test group, 287 soldiers. January 1970. They told us it was an immunization study, and we signed consent forms, but the forms were lies. They didn't tell us they were implanting tracking devices, didn't tell us the devices were experimental, didn't tell us what it would do to our minds." Sarah was photographing everything with her phone. "What did it do? Made us fearless. That was the goal. Suppress the amygdala's fear response. Make soldiers who'd follow any order without hesitation. The problem was, you can't just turn off fear without affecting everything else. Depression, rage, paranoia, suicidal ideation." Bob pulled out a file folder, hands shaking. "Within 5 years, 42 of us were dead. By 1990, 106. They've been cleaning up the evidence ever since. Anyone who asks too many questions has an accident." Walter felt the room spinning. "My son. They did this to him, too." "I know. Ryan Mitchell." "Right. I've been tracking the newer iterations. They refined the technology. Smaller devices, different implantation methods. They tested it on soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan starting in 2004. Your son was in the 2008 cohort at Fort Benning." "How do you know all this?" Bob moved to a desk in the corner and pulled out a metal box. Inside were USB drives, dozens of them. Bobby Crenshaw. Before they killed him in that fire, he managed to copy classified documents from the medical facility at Fort Lewis, sent them to me and Tom Hayes for safekeeping. Tom burned his copy. I kept mine. He handed Walter one of the drives. "Everything's on here. Medical protocols, test results, names of everyone involved, and a list of every soldier they implanted from 1908 to 2008. Sarah looked up from her phone. They were still doing this 7 years ago. Far as I know, they never stopped, just got better at hiding it. Walter's hands trembled as he held the drive. Ryan said in his video that he was going to expose them. That's why they made him disappear. Bob's face went gray. They didn't kill him, Walt. That's not what they do with the ones who figure it out. They take them where I don't know the location. But I know there's a facility where they keep soldiers who've had adverse reactions to the implants or who've tried to go public, officially listed as missing or killed in action, actually held in a military psychiatric facility somewhere in the mountain states, Montana, maybe Colorado. Tom heard about it from a doctor who worked there in the 80s, got drunk and talked too much at a VFU bar. The doctor died a week later, fell down his stairs. As Sarah had stopped photographing, you're saying Ryan might be alive. If he didn't die in the first 72 hours after they took him, yeah, they'd have him locked up somewhere, probably pumped full of drugs to keep him docile. Can't kill them all, too many questions. Better to hide them away where no one will ever find them. Walter's chest tightened. 15 years. 15 years believing his son was dead, grieving an empty casket at Arlington National Cemetery, watching Margaret die of a broken heart. In all that time, Ryan might have been alive, might still be alive. I need that list of facilities, Walter said. I need to know where they took him. It's not on the drive. That information is too dangerous to write down. But I know someone who might know. Patricia Morrison. She was a nurse at Fort Lewis, worked directly under Colonel Edmund Price. He ran Project Sentinel from the start. Patricia quit in 1973, moved to Alaska, went completely off-grid, but she sent me a letter in 2003 saying if I ever needed to find her, she'd be in Anchorage. That was almost 20 years ago. It's all I've got. A sound cut through the room, the security monitor beeping. Bob's head snapped toward the screen. 3 vehicles were pulling up the gravel road, black SUVs, moving fast. They found you, Bob said, grabbing the shotgun. Take the drive and go. There's a back exit through the basement. My truck keys are hanging by the door. Go to Anchorage. Find Patricia Morrison. Tell the truth before they bury all of us. Bob, we can't just leave you. Yes, you can. I'm 76 years old. Been waiting for this moment for 50 years. I'm done running. He chambered around. Your son needs you. Walt, your father would want you to finish this, Dr. Bennett. Now go. Sarah grabbed Walter's arm, pulling him toward the basement stairs. Behind them, Bob Crawford stood at his window, watching the SUVs approach, an old soldier making his last stand. They reached Sarah's car as the first gunshot echoed from the house. Walter looked back, saw Bob's silhouette in the window, saw the muzzle flash. Then Sarah was driving, tires throwing gravel, and the house was disappearing in the rearview mirror, along with another name added to the list of casualties in a war that never ended. Walter clutched the USB drive like a lifeline. Somewhere out there, his son was waiting. And Walter Mitchell had spent 15 years being the father who didn't believe he wouldn't make that mistake again. The pawn shop on East Burnside Street smelled like desperation and broken dreams. Walter stood at the counter, Margaret's wedding ring resting in his palm, a simple gold band worn thin by 48 years of marriage. The ring had cost him 2 months' salary in 1903. Now It represented the only thing standing between him and losing everything. "I can give you 150, the clerk said. Barely glancing at it, Walter's throat tightened. "It's 14-karat gold. It's worth at least 500. Buddy, I got a drawer full of gold. Market's flooded. Best I can do is 150. Take it or leave it." He took it. What choice did he have? The bank wanted $4,800 in 14 days or they'd foreclose. He had $163 in checking. Sarah had already paid $800 for the medical analysis. He couldn't ask her for more. The ring disappeared into the clerk's drawer. Walter pocketed the cash and walked out into the rain, feeling like he'd just sold a piece of his soul. Sarah was waiting in the car, parked 2 blocks away in case the SUVs found them again. They'd driven straight through from Spokane, stopping only for gas. Too terrified to sleep. Bob Crawford was dead. She'd found the news report online. Elderly veteran killed in home invasion. Suspect fled the scene. Home invasion. As if anyone believed that. "I need to show you something," Sarah said when he got in the car. Her laptop was open, displaying a news article from 2009. "I've been digging into Ryan's disappearance. Look at this." The headline read, "Military investigates soldier deaths at Fort Benning." The article detailed 6 soldiers from Ryan's unit who'd died within 8 months of deployment, 3 suicides, 2 training accidents, 1 unexplained drowning. "Standard post-deployment statistics," Walter said, though his gut twisted. Except they all went through the same enhanced medical screening program 2 weeks before deploying. The program was discontinued after an investigation, but the investigation results were classified. Sarah scrolled down. "I found similar patterns at 4 other bases between 2004 and 20. Enhanced screenings, followed by clusters of deaths and psychiatric hospitalizations." Walter stared at the screen. "How many soldiers?" "At least 1,200 that I can document. Probably more. 1,200. The number hit him like a physical blow. 1,200 Ryan Mitchells. 1,200 families destroyed. 1,200 cover-ups. "We need to go public," Walter said. "Take everything to the media." I tried. I reached out to Rebecca Clark at ProPublica 3 days ago. She said she needs more than documents and x-rays. She needs testimony from officials, paper trails that can't be disputed, preferably someone still inside the system willing to talk. Sarah's voice cracked. "Without that, it's just conspiracy theory. They'll bury us in lawsuits and classification claims. Then we find someone inside." Who? "Everyone who knows about this is either dead or too scared to talk." Walter thought of Tom Hayes, refusing to speak even with the evidence in front of him. Thought of Bob Crawford, who'd waited 50 years for someone to believe him. Thought of Margaret, killed for asking too many questions. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. His hand hovered over it. "Don't answer," Sarah warned. He answered anyway. Maybe because he was tired of running. Maybe because rage had finally burned through fear. "Mitchell!" The voice was different from the last call, younger, more official. "My name is Colonel James Thornton. I need to speak with you about matters concerning national security." "Go to hell. I understand your anger. But if you want to see your son again, you'll meet with me. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. at the Multnomah Falls Lodge. Come alone." "Why would I trust you?" "Because I am the only person in the Department of Defense who's trying to help you. I've been investigating Project Sentinel for 3 years. Bob Crawford's death wasn't supposed to happen. Those men were acting without authorization. Meet me tomorrow, and I'll tell you where Ryan is." The line went dead. Sarah had heard the whole conversation. "It's a trap." "Probably. You're going anyway. If there's even a chance he knows where Ryan is, then I'm coming with you." They argued for 20 minutes, but Sarah wouldn't budge. Finally, Walter agreed, on the condition that she stay in the car with the engine running, ready to leave if anything went wrong. That night, in a cheap motel off Highway 84, Walter couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the ring, now in some pawn shop drawer next to other people's surrendered memories. Margaret would have understood. She'd have sold her own ring without hesitation if it meant finding Ryan. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through old photos. Margaret and Ryan at his high school graduation. Ryan in his army dress uniform. The last family photo. Taken Christmas 2008, 3 months before Ryan deployed. They were all smiling. They had no idea what was coming. A knock on the adjoining door, Sarah's room. Walter let her in. Her eyes were red from crying. "I found something else on the USB drive," she said, holding up her laptop. "Medical records from the facility where my father was treated before he died. Look at the admitting physician." Walter read the name to Edmund Price. "That's the same Colonel Stimmel who ran Project Sentinel at Fort Lewis." Sarah's voice shook with fury. "He implanted the devices. Then, when the soldiers started having psychiatric breaks, he committed them to military hospitals under his supervision. He's been covering this up for 50 years. Walt, and he's still doing it." She pulled up a Department of Defense organizational chart. To Edmund Price, now Colonel Price, retired, was listed as a consultant to the VA's Psychiatric Services Division. "He has access to every veteran in the system," Sarah whispered. "Everyone who seeks treatment, everyone who files a claim. If you start asking questions about implants or Project Sentinel, he knows." Walter's blood ran cold. That's how they knew. When Ryan started investigating, when Margaret started filing complaints, when Tom tried to, he couldn't finish. "We need protection, real protection. Federal marshals, FB, someone outside the military chain of command, and tell them what that a retired colonel has been covering up illegal medical experiments for 50 years. They'll think we're insane. We need proof, undeniable, documented proof." The next morning, they drove to Multnomah Falls. The parking lot was half empty on a weekday morning. The falls thundered in the background, 600 feet of water crashing down basalt cliffs. Tourists took selfies. Children ran and laughed, completely unaware that 2 people sitting in a Honda Civic were about to walk into what might be an ambush. At 2 p.m. exactly, a man in civilian clothes approached the car. He was 50-ish, military-bearing despite the casual jacket. He knocked on Walter's window. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Colonel Thornton. Thank you for coming." Walter got out, leaving the door open. Sarah stayed in the driver's seat, keys in the ignition. "Where's my son?" "First, I need you to understand something. I'm risking my career, possibly my life, by talking to you. Project Sentinel is one of the darkest chapters in U.S. military history. The people who ran it, who continue to protect it, have unlimited resources and no conscience. I don't care about your career. Where is Ryan?" Thornton pulled out a folder. Inside were his photographs of a facility, concrete buildings, high fences, remote location, Clearwater Military Medical Center. Montana. Officially, it's a treatment facility for soldiers with severe PT. Unofficially, it's where they keep the ones who figured out what was done to them. Walter's hands shook as he took the photos. How many? Right now. 47. Some have been there since the 80s. Jesus Christ, your son is in Building C under the name John Doe for us. And they erased his identity, his records, everything. As far as the Army is concerned, Ryan Mitchell died in Afghanistan in 2009. Why are you telling me this? Thornton's jaw tightened. Because I took an oath to defend this country, not to cover up war crimes. I've been trying to expose this from inside, but I'm being blocked at every level. Colonel Price has friends in very high places. The only way this ends is if someone on the outside forces it into the light. Then help us. Go on record. Testify. I will. But you need to get your son out first. Once this goes public, they'll move all the prisoners or worse. You have maybe 72 hours before they realize I've talked to you. Walter looked at the photos. His son was in one of these buildings, alive after 15 years of grief, of guilt, of wondering Ryan was alive. How do I get him out? Thornton handed him another envelope. Everything you need. Security layouts, shift schedules, access codes. I can get you inside, but you'll have to get him out on your own. And Mr. Mitchell, he glanced at Sarah in the car. Colonel Price knows about Bennett. He knows she's David Bennett's daughter. He's planning to use her as leverage if you don't back off. The implication hung in the air like a noose. Then we move fast, Walter said. The Greyhound bus to Montana left at midnight. Walter and Sarah sat in the back, surrounded by sleeping passengers and the smell of stale coffee. Neither of them had spoken since leaving Portland 6 hours ago. What was there to say? They were heading into a military facility to extract a prisoner who'd been held for 15 years. They had a folder full of security codes from a colonel who might be setting them up. They had no weapons, no backup, no real plan beyond getting inside, and time was running out. Sarah broke the silence first. There's something I need to tell you about Colonel Price. Walter turned from the window. Her face looked ghostly in the passing highway lights. When I was going through my father's effects after he died, I found letters hidden in the attic, sealed in plastic. Letters from my mother to someone she called E. And Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't understand them then. I was only 5. But I kept them last night. I read them again. She pulled out her phone, showing Walter photographs of yellowed pages covered in elegant handwriting. My mother was having an affair with Colonel Edmund Price. It started in 1974, years after my father came back from Vietnam. She wrote about how David was falling apart, how the nightmares were getting worse, how he kept talking about things in his body that were watching him. Price told her he could help. He was a doctor. He said David just needed the right treatment. Walter's stomach turned. Treatment at the facility where Price worked, where Price experimented on him, where he probably increased whatever effects those devices were having, all while pretending to help. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. My mother trusted him. She thought she was saving her husband. Instead, she delivered him to the man who destroyed him in the first place. Does your mother know about Price running the project? I don't think so. After my father died, Price broke off the relationship, told her it was too complicated, too painful. She never heard from him again. She spent the rest of her life believing my father was just another casualty of war, that his mental illness was natural, unavoidable. Sarah's voice cracked. I need to tell her the truth, but I don't know if I can do that to her. Walter understood. Some truths were too heavy to bear. But he also knew that secrets were poison, that they rotted everything they touched. Margaret had died chasing the truth. Bob Crawford had spent 50 years drowning in it. Tom Hayes had let fear silence him until it killed him anyway. Tell her after, Walter said. After we get Ryan out, after we expose what they did, give her the truth when we can also give her justice. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. The bus pulled into Great Falls, Montana, at 8 a.m. They rented a car, Sarah's credit card, paid in cash to avoid a trail. Clearwater Military Medical Center was 90 miles northeast, near the Canadian border. Colonel Thornton's intel said visiting hours were 10 to 4, with minimal security during the day. Night security was heavier, but the skeleton crew made it easier to move around once inside. They were going in at 2 p.m., right in the middle of the day shift change. As Sarah drove, Walter studied the facility layout. Building C was at the northeast corner, isolated from the main hospital complex. 47 men kept in what amounted to a prison, hidden behind the facade of medical care. The building had 2 entrances, main door requiring key card access, and a service entrance that connected to the underground tunnel system. Thornton's plan was simple. Sarah would go in the main entrance posing as a VA psychiatrist conducting a study on long-term PTSD treatment. Her credentials would get her through the first checkpoint. Walter would use the service entrance with maintenance credentials Thornton had provided. They'd meet in the third-floor medical records room, locate Ryan's file to confirm his room number, then move to extract him during the chaos of shift change. Simple, except for the 100 ways it could go wrong. What if he doesn't recognize me? Walter said suddenly. 15 years in a place like that? Whatever drugs they've given him? What if he doesn't know who I am? Sarah reached across and squeezed his hand. Then we make him remember. One way or another, we're bringing him home. They parked 2 miles from the facility and walked the rest of the way through Forest Service roads. At 1:30 p.m., they split up. Sarah headed for the main entrance, briefcase in hand, looking every bit the professional researcher. Walter circled around to the service entrance. A nondescript metal door set into a concrete wall. He punched in the code Thornton had provided. The lock clicked. The door opened. Inside was a maintenance corridor, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The smell of industrial cleaner and something else, something that reminded Walter of the VA hospital where he'd visited wounded buddies back in the 70s. The smell of sedation and surrender. He followed Thornton's map through the tunnel system, climbing 2 flights of utility stairs. His heart hammered against his ribs. The device near his skull seemed to pulse, probably just his imagination. Anxiety manifesting as physical sensation. But he couldn't shake the feeling that Price knew that somewhere in this building alarms were sounding, guards were mobilizing, and he was walking into a trap. The medical records room was empty. Sarah was already there, scrolling through files on a computer. "Found him," she whispered. "Room 347. John Doe, diagnosed with severe schizophrenia and dissociative disorder. High-dose antipsychotics. Sedation is needed. Walt?" Her voice broke. "They've had him on enough medication to keep an elephant docile. Can he be moved? We'll have to. But withdrawal from these drugs can cause seizures, psychosis. He'll need careful medical supervision. First we get him out, then we worry about treatment. They move through the corridors, Sarah in front with her visitor badge, Walter following close enough to look like an escort. Third floor, east wing. The building was quiet, except for occasional moans from behind locked doors. Room 37 had a small window in the door. Walter looked through it and felt his heart stop. The man inside was unrecognizable, gaunt, hair gone white despite being only 40 years old, sitting on the edge of a bed and staring at nothing. But Walter knew the shape of his jaw, the set of his shoulders, knew them the way you know your own reflection. "Ryan," he whispered. Sarah swiped her badge. The door clicked open. They stepped inside. Ryan didn't look up, didn't react at all. His eyes were empty, all the light gone from them. "Ryan," Walter said again, moving closer. "Ryan, it's Dad. I'm here. I came for you." Nothing, not even a flicker of recognition. Sarah checked his pupils, his pulse. "He's heavily sedated. They probably dose him every 6 hours. Walter knelt in front of his son, taking the limp hands in his. They were cold. "Ryan, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I should have listened, but I'm here now, and I'm taking you home." For a long moment, nothing. Then Ryan's eyes shifted, focused on Walter's face with tremendous effort. His mouth moved, forming words that barely made sound. "Dad." The word broke Walter into pieces. "Yeah, buddy, it's me." "You came?" Tears rolled down Ryan's hollow cheeks. "I knew you'd come. Mom said you would." Walter's throat closed. "Mom's..." He couldn't tell him. Not now. "We need to go. Son, can you walk?" Ryan tried to stand, legs shaking. Sarah supported him from one side, Walter from the other. They moved toward the door. That's when the alarm started. Red lights flashed in the corridor. A computerized voice announced, "Security breach. Building C. All personnel report to stations. Lockdown protocol initiated." "Thornton sold us out," Sarah said. "Or Price figured it out." Walter looked both ways down the corridor. Guards would be coming. They had minutes at best. "We go back the way I came. The service tunnels?" They half carried Ryan through the corridors, his feet dragging, head lolling. Behind them, voices shouted. Boots pounded on tile. They reached the stairwell just as the first guard rounded the corner. "Stop, federal facilities, stop now." Walter didn't stop. They plunged down the stairs, Sarah gasping with effort, Ryan a dead weight between them. 2 flights, 3. The service tunnel stretched ahead, seeming miles longer than before. Halfway through, Ryan collapsed completely. "Can't, legs won't." Walter didn't hesitate. He bent and lifted his son in a fireman's carry. 40 years and 3 tracking devices, be damned. His back screamed, his lungs burned, but he kept moving. Sarah reached the exit first, punched the crash bar. The door flew open, and Colonel Edmund Price stood on the other side, flanked by 6 armed guards. "Hello, Mr. Mitchell?" Price said. He was 85 years old, but stood straight as a flail, eyes cold and sharp. "I've been waiting for you." Walter set Ryan down gently against the tunnel wall, positioning himself between his son and the guards. His chest heaved from exertion, but he kept his eyes locked on Colonel Price. This close, he could see the man who'd destroyed hundreds of lives' crisp uniform, medals gleaming, the face of patriotic duty masking something rotten underneath. "You're not taking him back," Walter said. Price smiled, without warmth. Mr. Mitchell, you've committed multiple federal crimes, breaking into a military medical facility, attempting to abduct a patient under psychiatric care. Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done? Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done? Sarah stepped forward, voice shaking with rage. You experimented on soldiers without consent. You've been covering up your crimes for 50 years. You killed my father. And Price's expression flickered surprise, then recognition. To Bennett, Sarah, you look so much like your mother. He said it with an intimacy that made Sarah's skin crawl. Barbara was a remarkable woman. I tried to help your father. What happened to David was tragic, but it was his own fragile mind that, don't you dare. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. You implanted devices in him. You drove him insane, then committed him to your facility where you could experiment on him more. My mother trusted you, and you used that trust to spare her from a husband who was becoming dangerous. Price's voice turned cold. David Bennett would have hurt someone eventually. The devices didn't cause his breakdown. They revealed his underlying instability, as did your son's, Mr. Mitchell. Ryan was psychologically unfit for service. The screening process simply confirmed what was already there. Walter's vision went red. My son tried to expose you. That's why you made him disappear. Your son had a psychotic break during deployment. He became violent, paranoid, a danger to his unit. We gave him the best care available. You erased him. Walter's voice echoed through the tunnel. 15 years locked in a room, pumped full of drugs, while his mother died thinking he was dead. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for national security. Sacrifices. Sarah's voice rose to a shout. You sacrificed 287 soldiers in 1970, over 1,000 more in the 2000s. How many lives destroyed so you could play God? Price's jaw tightened. I served my country. Every decision I made was approved by officials far above my pay grade. Project Sentinel was designed to save American lives by creating soldiers who could operate without the limitations of fear. Yes, there were complications. Yes. Some men couldn't handle the psychological effects, but the program succeeded far more than it failed. 42 dead in 5 years, Walter said. You call that success. I call it acceptable losses in service of a greater goal. Behind them, Ryan stirred. His voice came out slurred but defiant. You're a monster. You know what you did. All of you knew. Price looked at Ryan with something almost like pity. Son, you've been unwell for a very long time. These people are trying to help you believe in a conspiracy that doesn't exist. Come with me, and we'll get you back to your room where you can rest. I'm not your son. Ryan tried to stand, using the wall for support. And I'm not going anywhere with you. Price nodded to the guards. Take them all into custody. Mitchell and Bennett are to be charged with breaking and entering, attempted kidnapping, and espionage. The patient returns to his room. The guards moved forward, and then headlights flooded the tunnel entrance behind Price. 3 vehicles screeched to a stop. FBI sedans and a news van. Doors flew open. Federal agents poured out, weapons drawn. Behind them came Rebecca Clark from ProPublica with a camera crew. Colonel Thornton stepped out of the lead vehicle. Colonel Price, You're under arrest for violations of the Nuremberg Code, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice. Lower your weapons." Price's face went pale. "Thornton, you traitorous—" "I'm a soldier who still believes in the Constitution." Thornton gestured to the FB agents. "These people have been investigating the Project Sentinel for 6 months, based on evidence I provided. We've been waiting for you to make a move. Thank you for gathering everyone in one convenient location." Rebecca Clark was already filming. "Colonel Price, can you comment on allegations that you ran illegal medical experiments on American soldiers for over 50 years? Price's composure cracked. He looked from the cameras to the FB agents to Walter Mitchell holding his broken son. For just a moment, the mask slipped, and Walter saw something like panic in the old man's eyes. Then Price straightened, became military again. "I have nothing to say without my attorney present." "That's fine," Thornton said. "You'll have plenty of time to talk." He nodded to the agents, who moved forward with handcuffs. As they led Price away, he looked back at Sarah. "Your mother never knew. I spared her that. At least, tell Barbara that what I felt for her was real." Sarah's voice was ice. "My mother's name isn't for you to speak anymore." The FBI secured the facility. Medical personnel rushed in to care for Ryan and the other 46 prisoners. Sarah rode with Ryan in the ambulance to Great Falls Regional Hospital, monitoring his vital signs as they started the careful process of reducing his medications. Walter gave his statement to the FBI, everything from Fort Lewis in 1970 to Bob Crawford's death to the documents on the USB drive. They already had most of it, thanks to Thornton. But Walter's testimony filled in gaps, personal accounts, names, deaths that had been dismissed as accidents or suicides. 3 hours later, Walter sat in a hospital waiting room while doctors examined Ryan. Thornton found him there, looking exhausted but grimly satisfied. "We're raiding 7 other facilities tonight," Thornton said. "There are more. Probably 100 soldiers still held in conditions similar to your son's. And we found the records. Every name, every experiment, every death. Price kept meticulous documentation. Probably thought it would protect him if things went wrong. Will he go to prison? If there's any justice left in this country, yes. But he has powerful friends. This is going to be a long fight." Walter nodded. He was too tired for anger now, too tired for anything but relief that Ryan was alive, that the truth was finally coming out. Sarah emerged from the treatment area. "He's stable. The doctors say it'll take months to safely wean him off the medications. There may be permanent psychological damage. But Walt—" Her eyes filled with tears. "He remembers. He knows who you are. He asked for you." And Walter stood on legs that suddenly felt stronger than they had in years. "Can I see him? He's waiting." The room was small, sterile, but nothing like the cell at Clearwater. Ryan lay in a hospital bed, IV lines running into his arms, monitors beeping steadily. His eyes still hollow, still haunted, tracked to Walter when he entered. "Dad." The word came easier this time. "You really came." Walter took his son's hand, feeling the pulse beneath papery skin. 15 years of grief and guilt and rage, and now this moment. Imperfect and damaged, but real. "I'm sorry it took so long," Walter said. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you when it mattered." Ryan's fingers tightened weakly around his. You're here now. That's what matters. They sat in silence for a long tea outside the window. The sun was setting over the Montana plains, painting everything gold and red. The color of endings and beginnings. Sarah stood in the doorway, giving them space but staying close. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, depositions, media circuses. Tomorrow they'd have to figure out how to rebuild a life from ruins. But tonight, a father held his son's hand and felt, for the first time in 15 years, something like hope. Some truths take a lifetime to surface, but they're never too late to matter. Walter Mitchell spent 15 years believing he'd failed his son, carrying guilt that nearly destroyed him. He'd dismissed Ryan's warnings, called them paranoia, let fear and disbelief build a wall between them. But when faced with the impossible choice between safety and truth, between silence and justice, Walter chose to believe. He chose to fight. And in that choice, he found redemption not just for himself, but for hundreds of families who'd suffered in silence, dismissed and forgotten by the very system that was supposed to protect them. This story reminds us that believing someone you love, even when it sounds impossible, even when it frightens you, can be the most powerful act of faith. That standing up for truth, no matter how late, no matter the cost, can heal wounds we thought were permanent. That family isn't just about blood, it's about showing up, about refusing to give up, about the courage to admit when we were wrong and the strength to make it right. Have you ever regretted not believing someone when they needed you most? What would you do differently if given a second chance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.